Thank you so much to those of you who braved the lovely Michigan weather. And for those of you who came all the way over here from the law school, especially grateful that you made it here. I'd really like to thank our speakers for traveling to be with us today. I think it is so important that our university community, and I can actually take this off now, our university community mark what is about now 3 months since the August 12th attack on writer Salman Rushdie, and discuss what we might learn from this terrible event and how we might better defend artists and artistic expression going forward. And I have just a couple of technical details to share. We are recording the event for the Donia Center, and the recording will appear on the website, but we would ask that no one make a private recording of the event. For those of you on Zoom, and warm greetings to those of you joining on Zoom, the chat is not enabled for this event, but please do be thinking of questions and putting them in the Q&A. And I think we can have a nice sort of seminar type discussion with our speakers on all of these critical topics. I would also say for those of you sharing questions in the Q&A, you can be anonymous if you choose to be. I know that for some people, these topics may be security sensitive, and that is an option. So I'm going to be the first speaker in addition to being the moderator. And what I'm going to do in my time is provide a quick overview of the international legal framework governing freedom of artistic expression. And then I'm going to introduce this wonderful panel who are a sort of a dream team, really, to lead a discussion on these topics. And I'm really looking forward to that. But just a few words to begin with. So Salman Rushdie was stabbed just as he was about to give an address on providing safe haven to artists at risk on August 12th at the Chautauqua Institution. And this really sent shockwaves around the cultural and artistic world. Mr. Rushdie was knifed. He lost an eye. He lost the nerves in one of his arms, which he may not be able to use. He had 15 wounds to his torso. And as we know, a 24-year-old from New Jersey named Hadi Matar has been indicted by a grand jury for this terrible attack. And I think what's important to understand is, of course, first and foremost, this was an attack on a human being. It was also an attack on an artist. And even beyond that, it was an attack on freedom of expression and on peaceful assembly itself. And certainly a reminder of how crucial it is to take more effective action to protect things we often take for granted: art, artists, the ability to gather around creativity. On August 12th, while we were waiting for news of Mr. Rushdie's condition, I took to that now endangered space, Twitter, and asked people to share his words under the rubric #words more powerful than knives. For me, as the former UN Special Rapporteur on Cultural Rights, this was both a way of countering the attack, which sought to silence the writer, but it was also a way of showing him respect. And I was very moved that people literally from all regions of the world chimed in, sharing some of their favorite passages from Salman Rushdie's books. And I think this is a critical reminder that there are defenders and supporters of freedom of expression in every region in the world. This is not about one part of the world against another. There are those, and I think Salil Tripathi will speak more about this, who have criticized Mr. Rushdie in all regions of the world. There are those who have defended his rights as well. And I think, for example, about the iconic 1989 demonstration, right after the fatwa was issued, the religious order against him was issued by the Ayatollah Khomeini. And this was a demonstration of British South Asian women who came together in London to march in support of Salman Rushdie's right to write. And I think we cannot forget the diversity of those who supported him when he was under siege. Some of those same women activists published a statement in August in a journal called Feminist Dissent, condemning the attack on Salman Rushdie and stressing that they were, quote, equally committed to anti-racist politics that opposed the demonization of all Muslims as fanatical as they were to challenging fundamentalisms in all regions. And I think both of those strands are vitally important for the discussion that we're going to have today. And so back to that difficult day of August 12th, it was truly empowering to hear the voices raised all around the world, quoting Rushdie's words, and to be reminded that the words for which he was threatened and brutalized themselves were unstoppable. They would not die. They could not be erased. Some of the quotes from that day really stay with me, and I want Mr. Rushdie's words to be with us in the room. For example, from Midnight's Children, where he asked, "Who am I?" And then he said, "My answer, I am the sum total of everything that went before me, of all I have seen, done, of everything done to me. I am everyone, everything whose being in the world was affected by mine. I am anything that happens after I've gone, which would not have happened if I had not come. Nor am I particularly exceptional in this matter," he wrote. "Each I, every one of the now 100 million plus of us, contains a similar multitude. I repeat for the last time, to understand me, you'll have to swallow a world." And this really shows, I think, the complexity of his vision of the world. Now, freedom of artistic expression, which creates the space for writing like this to be written, to travel, to be shared and read by all of us, is guaranteed by international law. And my job as special rapporteur was to remind governments of this over and over again. In fact, freedom of artistic expression is such an important human right that it is one of only a few rights found in both the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights and the Covenant on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights, as well as in the touchstone Universal Declaration of Human Rights itself. My predecessor as the Special Rapporteur on Cultural Rights, Farida Shahid of Pakistan, wrote an entire report about artistic freedom in 2013, which I recommend to you and which has been very influential. And artistic freedom, she stressed, should be fostered for everyone, including for so-called amateurs, for both performers and artists of all kinds and their audiences, really for all of us, that artistic freedom is a collective right in so many ways. When artists are threatened and attacked, they are, of course, the first and most important victims, but others are also deprived of access to their work and pressured to self-censor. When I was the UN Special Rapporteur, I regularly reminded states of these legal obligations and also that cultural rights like artistic freedom are not luxuries. In fact, they are critical to the enjoyment of many other human rights. They're also very important in and of themselves to who we are as human beings, but they help us access many other rights, freedom of expression. They are forms of freedom of assembly. They are critical to freedom of religion or belief, many other rights, the right to education and so on. And artistic expression also can help us to marshal attention to urgent concern. And very often when artists engage in this work, when they use their creative expression to give voice to human rights concerns, they themselves face risk, and then their human rights too need defending. And I wrote a report about this on what I called cultural rights defenders for the UN Human Rights Council in 2020. I think there's an incredible contemporary example of this when we see the way in which artists are contributing to the current Iranian uprising. And that uprising has produced an incredible outpouring of artistic expression, especially in the field of music. And I think many of you probably will have heard what I think is one of the most beautiful protest songs of all time, which is Shervin Hajipur's Baraya, which explains so clearly in words simply taken from other Iranians' tweets, some of the reasons for the protests, including, as he says, for my sister, your sister, our sister, for yearning for an ordinary life, for sunrise after a long, dark night. And I think artists have paid a very high price, as we've seen, for their involvement in this human rights struggle, including Hajipur himself, who wrote that song I just quoted, who was detained but then subsequently released. But there are other artists, including a singer, currently facing possible death sentences given the charges that are being brought against them. And I think it's poignant to recall that the government carrying out these particular violations of artistic freedom today is also the descendant of the regime whose supreme leader, the Ayatollah Khomeini, issued the 1989 fatwa or religious order against Rushdie, which forced him to live underground in a way for many years and to face constant danger. So really, I think these various attacks on artistic freedom come together. But it is critically important to remember that there are many different kinds of threats to artists and artistic freedom, and our speakers are going to explore that. The problem of religious fundamentalists targeting artists is unfortunately widespread and is not confined to just one religion. Salil Tripathi, among our panelists, reminded me the day after the attack on Salman Rushdie that in his own country of origin, India, no less than 4 writers had been killed by Hindu extremists in the last 6 years. Unfortunately, not a great deal of coverage of that issue in this country. In Sri Lanka, a playwright was questioned recently by authorities after a Buddhist monk alleged his work was blasphemous. And in fact, 79 countries around the world criminalize blasphemy, though the penalties vary widely. I'm very pleased to note that the now former Special Rapporteur on Freedom of Religion or Belief, Ahmed Shahid, who is a practicing Muslim himself from the Maldives, emphasized in his 2021 report to the Human Rights Council that criticism of the ideas, religious leaders, symbols, or practices should not be prohibited or criminally sanctioned. And in another report to the General Assembly, the Special Rapporteur on Freedom of Opinion and Expression, Irene Khan of Bangladesh, has also reiterated the Human Rights Committee's jurisprudence that this right does embrace expressions that may be regarded as deeply offensive by some, such as blasphemy. In other words, freedom of expression allows for speech which may be quite offensive to some, and there is no blasphemy exception to this. This has been clearly recognized by leading UN experts. I want to get very quickly to our panel. Let me just say also that these issues are coming up closer to home here in the United States, perhaps in a different form, but significant nonetheless. We're seeing increased pressure being placed on schools about what literary works children should have access to, including pushback against some very great books, such as works by Maya Angelou and Margaret Atwood. And we know that right here in the state of Michigan, the Dearborn School Board has faced a shutdown of its meeting recently over protest regarding access to books like This Book is Gay in school libraries. So the discussion we're having here is all too pertinent in this current fraught moment. We need to understand the roots of and the meaning of the attack on Salman Rushdie, and how such attacks can be prevented in the future. We need to contemplate how we can protect artistic freedom and those who practice it in the 21st century, faced with a range of threats. And we are really lucky to have an expert panel to consider these questions and also help us understand how we might better support artists at risk. So let me turn now to introducing our panel. And we begin with Salil Tripathi, who is a board member of PEN International and the former chair of PEN's International Writers in Prison Committee. Salil was born in Bombay and lives in New York. And between 2009 and 2013, he was on the board of English PEN. His writing has won numerous awards. And he reminded me today that his first book was entitled Offense: The Hindu Case, about the rise of Hindu nationalism and its implications on free expression. His next book will be about Gujaratis, people from the Gujarat region of India. It's my great pleasure to welcome Salman Rushdie, Salman Tripathi, to talk about Salman Rushdie.
As a boy who grew up in Bombay, lived in London and now in New York, I take it as a huge compliment to be called Salman. That's something you share with me. Thanks very much for a very important topic and at a very difficult time for the world. I want to take us back to February 1989. That was when the fatwa was declared. I was a young reporter in Bombay for a magazine called India Today, at a place called Bhendi Bazaar, which is the heart of where there's a lot of Muslim community, which was very angry and irate. None of them had read the book. Nobody had read the book in India. India had the dubious honor of being the first country in the world to ban the book. Now, it didn't ban the book. Interestingly, it banned its import. And its Indian publisher said they would not publish the book. So the idea of accessing it in those pre-internet days was impossible. So books started getting smuggled into the country. And the rumor was that the British Council Library had a copy. And a bunch of people who were fundamentalists wanted to go and burn down the library, as fundamentalists like to do. And the police in India, being the police in India, was trigger happy. And sadly, about a dozen people were shot and killed. I saw those deaths, wrote about it, and realized words matter. They matter in more ways than one. And as we keep seeing it again and again, I'll refer to some of those stories. This opposition that a group of people in his birthplace towards him was inexplicable. And it was inexplicable because he's one of the finest chroniclers of Bombay. I mean, if you read Midnight Children, when you read Last Sigh, or even if his later novels, including Kishore or Golden House, you see very loving and warm descriptions of the city that he considers own. And it's probably the city that he would identify with most. Salman, other people have written about the city. Anita Desai has written, there have been novels in the past about it, but children somehow brought the city to the fore. Very importantly, for anyone who grew up in the subcontinent, and I do say in the post-colonial world, he made people like us believe that we could own the language. Going to high school, the writers that we read in classes were Wordsworth and Shelley and Keats and Byron and Austen and Dickens and all that. And we thought that daffodils were the flowers to get interested in rather than frangipani or bohemian or all the other flowers that we were used to in India. Salman actually takes the language, twists it around, adds pickles to it, adds spices to it, and makes it his own and clones it. And as one religion called it, it was empire writing back. And that's what he did. And therefore you end up trying to find in that one great novel. He's written several great novels. I don't mean to say it was only one, but in Midnight Children, how Bollywood, India's own religious myths and India's history can get intertwined to produce the novel, which New York Times said it was a continent finding its voice, which means it wasn't listening because India had been talking for a long time. But that's Japan's problem, not my problem. So Bombay in 1987, a couple of years before that, he has already written Midnight Children, he has won the Booker Prize, and he's making a film called Riddle of Midnight. And that film was about India at 40. While making it, I've interviewed him for several times. All the interviews are accessible online, most of them at least. And I went to interview him and I asked him, what are you now working on? And he said, I'm interested in the idea of the origin of faith. What creates religion? What makes people believe? And what makes people doubt? And this argument between faith and reason. And why that sometimes we speak in a tongue which sounds evil, sometimes there are things which may seem sensible, and those who speak with moral certainties and appear to be self-righteous. I had no idea that this was the genesis of what he was doing, which became the Satanic Verses. And the whole idea of the nature of truth, origin, and so on, he started writing. That's a lesson I learned from that interview, that the challenge faith with doubt, and it's doubt is what distinguishes us from other things. And the whole idea of certainty of truth is questionable. And if we fast forward a little and look at Harun and the Sea of Stories, another great novel in which he talks about just the land of Chup, which means silence, and the land of Gup, which means talk. And it's a fight between talk and silence. But then evil forces, dark forces of silence. And it was, of course, an allegory about what he was going through with Iran. He was in hiding, and the novel came out in 1980. And then Satanic Verses comes out, right? What is it about? It's about England, it's about India, it's about France, it's about Islam, it's about the origin of faith and doubt. It questions the source of our beliefs, and it makes us want to question where we are and why we are in our hybrid lives. Some people say it's a very difficult novel to read. I happen to have read it, and I do think it's one of the great novels of the 20th century. It is his best novel. It's very hard to pick, but I would certainly rate it one of the top 3 or 4 of his novels. But as it often happens with books such as Ulysses in the past and such as the Slaughterhouse-Five and many other great novels, it has been misinterpreted. And it was misinterpreted so badly, and it is in the context of the situation in which the Iran and Iraq war was at that time. Ayatollah Khomeini was under enormous stress. He sees a television demonstration in India. On television, he sees a demonstration against the book, and he says, okay, there should be a fatwa against the writer. Without, I'm sure he hadn't read the book. And that's why we were. And that leads to his years of hiding, which he documents so well in Joseph Anthony. And you come to the good men down, right? So you get Harun in the Sea stories, and then after that, novel after novel, More Last Sigh, one of the finest testaments against Hindu fundamentalism, where it criticizes the Shiv Sena, the right-wing Hindu Nationalist Party, which is now turning left of center for peculiar politics, which we won't have the time to go into now. And this wonderful line that doesn't wish to destroy India, but first need to destroy Bombay first, because the polyglot multi-ethnic identity, which we celebrate so well. And then there's a novel about rock music and Lady Diana, Drowned in the Food, Shalimar the Clown, which takes us and talks about the kind of people who are driven to fight a war for a cause, which could be about ISIS, it could be about Al-Qaeda, there are parts of that too. Fury, the classic 9/10 novel, not 9/11 novel, it was published the week of 9/11, and it captures the zeitgeist of New York so well. And then, of course, he showed where you read about fentanyl and all the current crisis, and Golden House, where there is a Trump-like character, and about the transgender politics. So every issue that we are gripped with, he has written about. So yes, he's important for freedom of expression, but he's a great writer, a great chronicler of the last century. It's the Nobel Prize is short-sightedness that they missed him so far. They missed Graham Greene in the past and Philip Roth. I hope they will make up for it before too long. And to see this whole argument as West versus Islam, that, somehow Salman Rushdie is what Ian Burman calls Voltaire's coconut, brown outside, white inside. That's one way of, some people are criticizing Rushdie, and it's completely wrong there. Because a lot of people from the developing world, such as the Somali writer who is in South Africa, Nuruddin Farah, Shul Hassan is an academic at Jawaharlal University, or Karima is my good friend Gita Sahgal, who was part of the Vietnamese fundamentalist movement, who did this brilliant film about the defense of Rushdie by this radical progressive in England. Definitely worth watching it. It's on YouTube. If you see them, they are people who are not white and defending Salman, and white liberal voices, apparently outwardly liberal voices in the West, such as Edward D. Bennoune, John Le Carre, and German Rico, who said, "Oh, you can't do that. You can't offend another faith." That sounded like infantilizing a religion. Because every religion you can make fun of, but Islam is special. You should not, because they will react in an adverse manner, which actually is deeply insulting to anybody who thinks that, Islam is not necessarily a childlike. It's a profound faith, it's a belief. And a lot of people from the faith will not necessarily agree with this idea that a writer who writes against their faith, even if they disagree with, should be killed or should be banned or anything like that. So it's not to that in mind too. That happening, and that's thing I want to commend Salman about. And again, Julie will know because she and I are part of the PEN community. Salman campaign writers when the PEN has asked him, Shahidul Alam in Bangladesh, writers, he was basically talking about asylum in cities of risk, refugee units. That's not an Salman was one of the first to speak up for her. G.P. Dara, who is a South African writer, have wonderful stories which of course I will talk about them in Bangladesh when they were being killed. 12 of them were killed within the span of 3 years. Some of them were beheaded. And that time again, he comes to them. To the extent that 15th August was the attack, 10 days before, 12th August was the attack, 15th August was India's 75th anniversary. A few weeks before that, we approached him whether we would write a short paragraph about what it means India turning 75. We were on vacation in France. Within 4 hours, given time differences and all that, we got a beautiful paragraph, and with which we started that project which PEN published called India at 75. Well, I think the saying that faith is something special which should be treated separately, he thought was wrong because that's not an adult argument. It's not the right way to look at it. Offense can be given and taken. And as he has said, if you don't like a book, don't read it. Or argue with it. Challenge it. Try not to read it. But don't judge him. And certainly don't attack him physically or kill him or her, as the case may be. That's the attitude one should have. But the assumption is again that Islam is special and people speak of Charlie and people speak of other instances like that it's special, but it is not. As Karima pointed out, in India I know of at least 4 cases. A scholar called M.N. Kalgogi, a rationalist called Narendra Dabhankar, a writer called Gautam Lankesh, Gautam Panfer, a communist activist. These are the 4 names. And it's not just there. In Philippines, Maria Ressa has been threatened, who won the Nobel Peace Prize last year. Joan Cruz has been threatened. If I go beyond Katonda Rukira Bashaiza, he has been driven out of Uganda, for example. And 2 other writers have been killed. So writers face this risk. There's, of course, Daphne Caruana in Bolivia, in Malta, and the other name that comes to me immediately, Rana Politkovskaya in Russia. So these kinds of attacks have always happened, and it's not the monopoly of one particular faith to behave in this manner. And I think that's something really worth bearing in mind. Otherwise, we fall into this false binary that it's liberal values versus one particular religion. And that's simply not true. It's reason and doubt on one side and faith on the other. So, in that question, I mean, why is it that this happens? And I think I'm trying couple minutes. 1 minute. So let me come to the concluding part, which is this. That when people say that faith is special, I go back to what a Hindu philosopher called Vivekananda had said, that people who feel they have to defend a particular specific idol, deity, divinity, and that himself cannot be born, Vivekananda was very troubled when he heard that some temples, Hindu temples, were destroyed by Muslim rulers. And so he was angry when he was meditating, and the goddess appears. This is from their writing. She says, "Why are you upset?" And he says, "I'm upset because this is what's been done to you." And the goddess asks him at that time, and this is again from his writing, "Are you there to protect me, or am I there to protect you?" That's the kind of question that usually people of faith have to ask it. If you don't like it, challenge it, don't read it, argue with it, research against it, write a better book. These are the ways to confront ideas that are difficult and so on. And I want to conclude with 2 quotes of Salman. What kind of an idea are you? This is with a book from Satanic Verses, and they're perfectly quotable in free speech context. What kind of an idea are you? Are you the kind of compromises, that deals, accommodates yourself to find a niche to survive? Are you the structured blood-minded, that type of damn same motion that would rather break than smoke with the breeze? Almost certainly 99 times out of 100 be smashed to bits, but the 100th time change the world. And some writers change the world, and Salman is one of them. And he does what he himself writes again in the same novel, a poet's work. It's meant to say name the unmeanable, point at frauds, sides, start arguments to shape the world, to stop it from going to sleep. We should all stay awake. Thank you.
I'm just going to stay here now. Thank you very much, Salil, for those eloquent words, reminding us of getting beyond this mistaken framing of liberal values versus one particular religion and looking at a universal struggle for freedom of conscience. So we turn now to our next speaker, Julie Trébeau, who is the director of the Artists at Risk Connection, which is a project of PEN America that aims to safeguard the right to artistic freedom by connecting threatened artists to support, building a global network of resources for artists at risk, and forging ties between arts and human rights organizations. She has nearly 2 decades of experience in international arts programming and network building, including at the Museum of the City of New York. Do you want me to keep talking while you get that up there? Then I can also share that she has also worked at the Center for Architecture, the National Museum of Ethnology in the Netherlands, and the Musée du Quai Branly in Paris. And I can also say that her organization was a really critical partner for me in my work when I was the Special Rapporteur on Cultural Rights, and she was very committed to forming a coalition of organizations that care about the intersection of culture and human rights in the UN system. system. And I think I've run out of text, but we almost have the presentation up there. And if not, I'm sure Salil has more Rushdie quotes that he can share.
Thank you for filling, Karima. Good afternoon, everyone. Warm greetings to all of you. Okay, sorry. I'm very honored to be here, and really it's a pleasure to share this conversation with my fellow panelists. I really want to thank Karima for having us today and for all the work you have put to put this event together. I think the university is very fortunate to count on our expertise, and it's a delight to be there. So while it's still, like troubleshooting, I'd like to tell you a few words. So I am the director of this project, the Artist-Centrist Connection at PEN America. Just about us, let's see if the technology will be with me.
Konnichiwa, pussies. I'm the lowbrow gag queen, mangaka Rosa Nashko. I wanted to make bigger pussies. The police saw this as evidence of so-called obscenity. July 12, 2014, I was arrested.
I was sentenced 5 years because of one of my songs, which was a mix of rockstyle singing based on Quran verses.
Sexuality is a taboo. Anything there is sex involved, it makes people uncomfortable. Because of my work, I was getting threat from the religious extremists. I can get killed.
They push artists to censor themselves.
I just want to tell you that I'm not afraid.
So here we are. So a few words about our work at ARC. So what are we doing? We are the Artist-Centrist Connection. So it's a project of PEN America. Why I'm here is also because Salman Rushdie, for many years, have been the president of PEN America. PEN America is the American chapter of PEN International. So we defend the freedom to speak and the writing, and we have done that for over 100 years. Here in the US, we have over 7,000 members across the states. And we created this project because we were receiving more and more calls from non-creative writers, called for assistance from musicians, painters, sculptors that were seeking direct resources where they were facing persecution. So we put this project together, and the idea of ARC is to really safeguard the right to artistic freedom and make sure that artists, and not only artists, but also cultural professionals, can live and work safely everywhere. So what we do, we connect. So we have a connecting work, which is to connect persecuted artists with the direct support that they need. We facilitate cooperation between a human rights and art organization, and we amplify the stories and the work of the artists at risk, as well as raising visibility of the field, a small field of artistic freedom at all levels, national, local, national, and international levels. So since 2017, we have helped over 500 artists coming from 71 countries. We help them to be connected with what they need, and the most, like the assistance the most requested by artists when they face persecution are emergency fund, really pure cash, legal assistance, immigration assistance, but also relocation programs, being placed in a safe haven, going to a residency program, and also advocacy. And I think Salil mentioned really how Salman and all our writers, part of the PEN group, can elevate campaign for cases. So it's very important to really have the ability to convene a group of supporters when we have an artist that are facing danger. Our mandate is very broad because it's not it's all artists, not only writers, and it's all disciplines, very inclusive. We really help from visual artists to cartoonists to filmmaker, performance artists, dancer, and more. What is our program? So we have protection work that I was like just telling you about. We really connect artists at risk with direct resources offered by our network. We have partners all around the world, and they, you know, as the global crisis occur around the world, we work very like to promptly address and respond to the needs of artists and cultural worker. A prime example of this is our resilience and emergency grants that we have for visual artists in Eurasia. These resources help to cover basic needs for those artists, and also resilience grants for them to continue to work and create and express themselves freely. Our international work is actually has expanded tremendously as we have developed regional hubs. We have hubs in Africa, Asia, Latin America, the Middle East, and Ukraine, and have expert regional representative that lead these hubs. And they really are on the ground to drive our casework, our advocacy, to promptly and adequately help the artists when they face very urgent need. We also are able to provide, you know, this timely and adequate support by also providing a lot of training and workshop. We help to build capacity, not only on the front of the organization at the local level, but also for the artist. We have built a strong a strong advocacy and research program. So through our international work, as Karima mentioned, we collaborate with various UN special rapporteur, the rapporteur in the field of cultural rights, of course, but freedom of expression as well, freedom of belief. We have worked and continue to work with the Human Rights Council, with UNESCO, and with regional bodies such as the Pan-African Union or the Organization of American States. Really, the goal is to raise visibility about artistic freedom and cultural rights defenders, as Karima defined it in a report for the UN. It's critical to bring them to the map, and as they are really facing very high risk for the work they do. And we build this comprehensive publication and research on either country focused research, like we did a very good white paper on new legislation in Cuba, the Decree 349. We have done also a number of publications. I would like to invite you to look at our last report about banned books in the US that we released at PEN America. So, to give you a kind of an idea, a look at artistic freedom in 2022. While the threats to artistic freedom range to topics such as politics, religion, LGBTQI+, and gender issue commonly face censorship, Additionally, we also see that conflict, repressive government, and precarious socio-economical environment, among other factors, can exacerbate censorship. Alarming enough, PEN America 2021 Freedom to Write Index, a publication that we are doing in collaboration with PEN International, the report states that at least 277 writers, academic and public intellectuals in 36 countries in all geographic regions around the world were unjustly held in detention or imprisoned in connection with their writing, their work, or related advocacy. Over half of this 277 writers were also jailed during 2019 and 2020. And nearly 1/5, at least 62 writers, were serving sentences of 10 or more years in prison. In a digital age, when words transcend borders, the insurgent power of the pen can be as threatening to repressive rulers as armed resistance. At ARC, we especially find that the most daring cases that we are trying to help are coming from the South, mostly like Sudan, Egypt, Nicaragua, Cuba, Afghanistan, Myanmar, and of course, we have the ongoing war in Ukraine. And the cases, we have approximately 62% of the artists that reach out to us are visual artists. So it's also to let you know, who is really highly targeted. 25% are writers. And yet to transition to really what brings us today, over 200 artists in 2020 were targeted for allegedly hurting religious sentiments, violating public morality, on the pretext of inciting and glorifying terrorism. Due to the difficulty of providing a definition for defamation of religion at an international level, blasphemy is a category often subject to abuse and may be used to level a range of persecution against artists and other creative professionals. While there are permissible limitation to freedom of expression spelled out on the International Covenant and on Civil and Political Rights on grounds of protecting national security and public morals, if it is proven to be necessary and proportionate, blasphemy restriction almost never pass this test. So I thought that it will be enriching for our discussion to bring to light a few specific cases on persecution of artists and blasphemy. First, we have the case of Yahaya Sharif Aminu, a Nigerian gospel singer. In August 2022, the Nigerian singer was sentenced to death by hanging under Sharia law, which is, as you know, not actually codified as a legal system. So he was condemned this punishment for sharing a song on WhatsApp. I emphasize that not even publicly share, and that deemed insulting of the Prophet Muhammad. While giving a ritual due to procedural irregularity in January 2021, Yahaya still faces a lengthy sentence and is still in jail. I want to bring another case to your attention. This Lebanese indie rock band called Mashroof Laila. If you don't know Mashroof Laila, it's time to go to your Spotify and check it out. It's a very great band. So this band have faced widespread persecution and threats to their safety across the Middle East. Barred from performing in Jordan, Egypt, and Lebanon for reasons such as inciting debauchery and other acts deemed offensive to certain religious groups. The band disbanded in September 2022 due to the constant death threats, online harassment, and banning of their performances. Speaking of this repression, the band member Hamed Sino, the singer, reflected, "It is not a normal life to have 100,000 people telling you on Facebook that you must die." The persecution they face was also heavily based on their sexual orientation and politically charged lyrics. And finally, my last examples coming from my country. This is the murder of French academic Samuel Paty, who was beheaded in front of his school in October 2020 in the banlieue, in the suburb in Paris. It's another example of how many artists and intellectuals are not even safe in their own countries. Paty, as I say, was beheaded, and after showing to his student in his classroom a cartoon depicting Prophet Muhammad, this same cartoon that was published by Charlie Hebdo, and this was during a class on freedom of expression. This crime, I think, reignited debate on freedom of expression in the context of depicting of the Prophet through cartoon that was initiated in 2015, when 12 people were killed and 11 injured in the attack of the Charlie Hebdo's office. In the 2 years since Paty's murder, a criminal investigation in France is ongoing. And I wanted to kind of draw this example with the other example that we just show on the screen, because I think the repression and the attack, either you're an intellectual, a writer, a musician, a rapper, or a professor, are quite the same. The contexts are different. The profession is different, of course, but the attacks and the tactics used by state or non-state perpetrators are the same. And then I will be dismissed without saying the word of Salman, because I think this discussion could be summarized by what he said. The moment you declare a set of ideas to be immune from criticism, satire, derision, or contempt, freedom of thought becomes impossible. So I must be clear to you all today that what happened to Salman Rushdie on August 12, 2022 was a shocking act of violence that has implications for the safety of creative professionals across the world and in this country. Decade after this fatwa was issued, Salman was attacked on US soil by an assailant who was at that time 24 years old. He was born years after the Satanic Verses was even written. The attack on Rushdie was an attack on the right to disagree itself, an attack on democracy, an attack on freedom of expression at large. No matter the free expression rights we may have felt we won, these rights are vulnerable and can be trampled upon if we do not protect them and keep protecting them. Don't take them for granted. The attack on Salman and attacks against artists globally remind us that even in this democracy, we are not impervious to the violent suppression of artistic freedom. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Julie, for that important reminder of what you called the insurgent power of the pen and indeed of all forms of creativity. And I think it's that very power that those who fear artists are targeting when they attack them, alas. Thank you also for giving us that overview of global threats to artistic freedom. Last but absolutely not least, we come to Ahmed Naji. And Ahmed, this is a bio he wrote himself. I love the first sentence. It says, Ahmed Naji is a writer, journalist, documentary filmmaker, and criminal. His book, Using Life, published in 2014, made him the only writer in Egyptian history to have been sent to prison for offending public morality. His book, Rotten Evidence, chronicles his time in prison, which is due out in September of 2023 with McSweeney's. And such an important time, as we know, during the climate summit, a lot of discussion about the huge number of political detainees in Egypt. So I think it will be very important to read Ahmed's book. He has won a number of prizes, including the Dubai Press Club Award and the Open Eye Award, and he is currently a fellow at the Black Mountain Institute at the University of Nevada, Las Vegas, where he now lives in exile. Ahmed, the floor is yours. Thank you very much.
Hello, Michigan. How are you doing? First of all, thank you all for having me and to come and this snow here. And thank you for the online audience and Michigan University. I want to start by highlighting that as we are gathering here now in Egypt, the Environment Summit COP27 is being held in Egypt. In the same time, there is more than 17 writers who are present in Egypt, including my dearest friend and my dearest friend Ala Fattah, who've been in hunger strike now for more than 200 days, living under 100 calories per day. Ala also is a writer. His recent published book was called You Have Not Yet Been Defeated. It was published recently in English, so please check it and read it if you are interested. It's a book about activism, political, and mainly his main topic is about freedom of expression and internet age. So my name is Ahmed Naji. I'm a writer from Egypt, and I'm not brave. I'm not courage like Ala or Salman or those great writers and artists. Actually, I grew up under the military regime. And when I was 8 years old, I saw an old man called Naguib Mahfouz, who is the only Arabic writer who won Nobel Prize, he got stabbed in his neck when I was 8 years. And I remember asking my grandfather, why someone stabbing this old guy in his neck? And he was like, oh, because he's writing books. So I grew up knowing that writing book is dangerous and it could lead you to a serious consequence. But I was lucky when I got interested into book and writing, we had the internet age and the blogging age. So when I started writing and publishing, I was writing under a nickname, a hidden identity, so which gave me a huge freedom to express and to craft my writing and to discuss all these silent questions inside me about politics and religion and all this issue. In the meantime, I started my career as a journalist. So by this day, I was a regular journalist working on a state newspaper, writing about art and culture. And at night, I was a blogger under a nickname called Iblis. Now, I started writing novel and published. I published my first novel in 27, Rogers, which was surprisingly got a lot of attention and translated into different language. And then in 2014, I published my second novel, Using Life. After I published the novel, the official story is that there is this guy who read a chapter from the novel was published in newspaper. And there is this guy who claimed, oh, he read the chapter in newspaper. And when he read it, he got a heart attack. He felt illness. So he went to the police station and accused me, because in Egypt, we have there is a state narrative, which oh, we are an open country, democratic country, and we protect freedom of speech. So, but there is this guy who would go to the police station and accuse me of harming him and have kind of medical report. And this is supposed to build connection. And depending on that, the Egyptian Attorney General, the prosecutor, it's up to them to decide if this accusation is right or wrong. In my case, the Egyptian prosecutor took the case and accused me of several stuff like poisoning young kids' mind and heart, and obscenity and other stuff. This was happening in a time that, in the same time, politically in Egypt, we had a coup under our ruler, great ruler, President General Abdel Fattah al-Sisi. And it was a time that this new regime was kind of establishing the new border, the new rules. In all Egyptian legal system history, anyone accused of this, I was accused by a law basically designed to fight pornography. And in all Egyptian history, even if they arrest you selling pornography videos, the maximum they will fine you. The law said, oh, you could be fined from 1,000 Egyptian pound to 20,000 Egyptian pound. But you also they could send you to prison for 2 years. So in my case, and at the time, no one before me were arrested by this law. So when we went to the court, we said, well, the worst case scenario is that you will fine me. So I went to the court with the money in my pocket. But then, surprisingly, I was sentenced for 2 years. I spent a year in the prison. And part of this year, I spent 5 or 6 months with Ala. We were in the same cell. We also a friend for more than 18 years now. I don't want to go through the whole journey, but talking about Salman Rushdie and the events that we are here, I remember there was a day in the prison. So in the prison, we were allowed to have, they will let only 2 newspapers to come into the prison. So we read and share, and this was our main source of the news. There is no newspaper. Not only for me or for Zine, but for all the prisoners, no new newspaper. And when we tried to ask the guard, where is the newspaper, what's happening, they didn't give any explanation. The next day also, there weren't any newspaper. Then after the newspaper come, A week after, my family was visiting me, and they told me, well, congratulations, you have been awarded the Ben Burberry Prize. And there is this famous writers and the artist who wrote a solidarity letter to you. So I got the news from them that the 2 days that the prison administration bans the newspaper, it was actually, they banned it because it contained news about my prize and the letter that was sent to me. And this is very important because it shows you and show us what is the aim of the authority of jailing all this writer and artist. The aim is not to punish only the writer and artist, because they know even if you punish them, they will not change or turn. It will make them more and more believing in what they believe. And it's an easy wallet for all this regime. If they found or think that that artist or writer is useful for them, they will buy him, not sending him to the prison. But the aim for jailing writer is to isolate them from the community, is to make them think that they are forgotten, that what they are doing is worthless. It doesn't mean anything. It doesn't affect anything. World doesn't care about you. And this is all the questions that writer and artist is facing while they are in the prison, because you start doubt what you are doing. You start to have a question about what you are doing. Is it worth it? Imagine if you just wrote a song and been jailed for 15 years, and you are in the prison now. So suddenly all this rhetoric that you believe, it started to dissolve and to finish. And for the world also, when you send writer to the jail and the prison, actually what we know from many cases that writer and artists got forgotten by those people. So this is more useful for the regime than killing the artists and writers. So, and that's what happened in my case. They tried to ban the news because they know that for me, this was going to change totally my mood. And I was going to it would help me to survive. And it did. Without the solidarity that I received from my fellow Egyptian writers and Arabic writers and international writers, it was overwhelming for me. I didn't expect this. I wasn't even consider myself a writer before entering the prison. But suddenly, when you are in the prison and you are receiving all this letter and all this small gesture, like I remember a cellmate, one day he came from his visit and he had like a tiny chocolate and he gave it to me. And he said, well, my daughter, she's 14 years old and she's reading about your case and she reads a novel and she sent you this chocolate. This is a small gesture starting from a chocolate bar you're getting from a kid to a letter from a big names like Salman Rushdie. It totally affects you and it totally make you believe. And it's also creates this bondage of literature brotherhood and connection with other people believing in freedom of expression and the human rights. While I was in the prison, also before entering the prison, I only read one novel by Salman Rushdie, Fury. And when I was in prison, I started to ask for books. And I remember there was two writers that I was always postponing reading them, Salman Rushdie and Hannah Arendt. So I started to ask for the books. So suddenly I was in the prison. I didn't know about any letter from Salman Rushdie. I was just reading his books. And I read like 4 or 5 of his novels while I was in the prison. And of course, this was a window into another world. I could say a window into heaven. Because for prisoners, there is only 2 ways to escape the prison. Dreams when you are asleep and books when you are awake. And this is the gift of writing and literature and books also for, I think, for everyone, but especially for prisoners, because they don't have more options. When I went out of the prison and suddenly I remember we received my brother, who was like, when I was in prison, my brother Muhammad, he traveled here and he got the award. And when he come back, he come with all this letter that I found. And I remember I was just like, it was like a couple of weeks after, or days after I went out of the prison, and you're still in this shock mood, like don't understand what is happening, what's going on, you don't know what's happening in the world for a year. And I remember reading all this letter from people that I don't know and from big names. And I was like, it looks like I've become a writer. I belong to something big. There is a network of lovely, nice people, human beings who also believe like we could do change and we could create a better world. I want to sum up so I have been here so I've been sentenced for a year. I went out of the prison in December 2016. Back at that time, when I went out also, I found my wife, who's also a human rights lawyer. When I went out, I suddenly found there was a similar campaign, media campaign against her. Like basically I went out of the prison, I opening the TV and I found the national TV, a TV presenter calling my wife a whore, for example, because she was also a human rights lawyer and a human rights defender. And back then time, there was a case of basically there was a bomb inside a church, and the government said, well, the guy who bombed himself his name is blah, 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 and his lawyer used to be my wife. So the guy was dead, and we are not sure even if this is the right guy, but there was this campaign against her. And also I found that I can't work anymore, not as a writer and not as back at the time I was starting to build a small company, agents for writer and belly dancer. So even that I wasn't able to work anymore, so we decided to leave. She got her master a fellowship at Syracuse University law, so she traveled. The plan was to join her. I went to the airport and I was banned. So it took me a year and a half to be able to sneak and leave Egypt, and arriving here in 2018. When I arrived also to United States, I arrived with a touristic visa, which only allow you to stay 6 months and also doesn't give you the right to work or do anything. But with the help of Writer at Risk and Ben America, I reached out to them also. And again, they helped me to put me in touch with another institute, Black Mountain Institute in Las Vegas. And they offered me this fellowship that I am in. And really, the City of Asylum program is providing a great help for writers from all over the world. And create and build this networking connection, that deep and root, like the sense of belonging to something big. I want to end up, so for the last 4 years, I have been speaking in several events like that. And I got to know that usually American audience, after you speak, their first question about how can we help? I have several suggestions. The first thing is listen to news, please. I'm shocked here how, I'm not even talking about regular people, because surprisingly, regular people care and follow the news. But I'm shocked when like speak to intellectual and even academic, and they're like, oh, my therapist advised me not to follow the news. It gave me post-trauma sense. And I'm like, well, if you don't like the NPR, I mean, you could get the news sum up to you by memes now, literally. So the first thing, just follow the news, your local news and international news. The other thing is care. Please care. Care about your local community and your big community. The third important thing is just don't leave the social media to the stupid and bureaucracy and arrogant people. Don't leave it to them, because this is has a huge effect on the whole world and even here in the United States. We are talking in the last couple of years about the social media playing a big role in election and affecting democracy and blah, blah, blah. But in other world, it's more even serious. People go to jail for 10 years because of posts on Facebook. My friend Ala, his last case, he's been sentenced 5 years just for retweeting a post. So caring about social media and about your rules there is very important. Every day, Karima talked about it, like on internet, how when you try to publish any, like, even if you try to write a statement supporting Hamid Sinnu, the musician, the amount of negative feedback and tweets that you got is unbelievable. And the crazy thing is that it's all organized, because the other side, they don't bend on just people joining the social media. No, they build a network, they build the cyber armies. The Saudi government recently, like, they published it heavily, like the structure of the Saudi cyber army. And they hire and recruit like thousands of people. Their job is just to sit on the internet and social media and Twitter and write about against anything, against human rights violation, against freedom of expression. So care more about your rule and about your doing. Even like and retweet could help. And the last thing is the battle for freedom of expression, the front line for the battle for freedom of expression is everywhere. It's not only in India or in Egypt and Iran, it's happening here, even around us. We have witnessing a lot of red flags happening. This campaign about banning books, or even they are talking now about persecuting librarians for letting these books in the library. So this is a battle that's coming close to us, even here and everywhere. Finally, thank you for being here, and thank you, Dr. Karim. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Ahmed, for those very moving words and sharing your story with us and reminding us this is not an abstraction that we're talking about, and what a grave impact this kind of repression of artistic freedom has on the lives of artists, their families, their communities, and so on. And I think so moving what you said about the way in which isolation is a goal of some of this repression, which makes our work to try to remain in contact with and in network with and in support of at-risk artists even more important. And I'm thrilled. There are a few of my students in the audience that you recommend following the news, because that's actually an assignment in my international law class. And we talk about the news every single day. So thank you for that recommendation. This has been such a rich set of remarks. I'd like to remind our friends on the Zoom, please, to put any questions in the Q&A. I have a list of questions, but I'm actually really eager to hear from the audience, and in particular from students. So I'll sort of go back and forth between audience questions, and I believe we have a microphone here, which Natasha is very kindly going to bring around, but also questions on the chat, and I can fill in with some questions of my own too. And I think I'm going to take a couple of questions and then let the panel address which ones they prefer. Don't be shy, otherwise I will start asking questions. Anybody on the Zoom or in the crowd? Well, I'm going to just jump in, but you're not off the hook, and especially the students, you know that I'm capable of calling on you, even across campus. I wanted to ask a specific question to Julie, but really to any of you. But this is something we were discussing earlier, and that is how the specific events, the attack on August 12th, have changed the way you are able to engage in this work and how you think about it. I can say, for example, even with this event, because of the topic, we knew we had to think much more carefully about the security dimension, not because you want to be melodramatic, but you just understand that you really have to be prepared. And we're living in a world where, unfortunately, violence may be a response to certain ideas and certain themes. But I'm just wondering how those events specifically affected your work. And if anybody else would like to comment on that, that's fine too.
I think I want to start by saying the attack against Salman just shake our organization at its kind of bone. He was a president for years. We were seeing Salman all the time. I think the head of PEN America exchanged email 2 days before the attack with Salman about the symposium we were organizing on September 12th, where he was part of the lineup. We were celebrating our centenary that day. So I felt that for us it was a real shock, and of course there was a moment like, but what does it entail? Like literally, it was really like the first time we are unfortunately used to attack, repression, but elsewhere. And of course, we have seen very worrisome trend here in the US, from the educational gag order to the banned books mentioned by Hamed, but so many things also is happening on the US soil, but not at that level. So one thing that happened immediately was like the physical safety of our events. So we are kind of in this hybrid event right now, but we're back really fully in person. So what does it mean to put, people on a stage, and how we can, take care of not only the people on stage, but also our audience. So that made us rethink internally at all our policy. And immediately, because what had happened is Salman was going to this event to talk about, artists, at risk, artists in exile in this country, with the founder of City of Exile, Pittsburgh. Immediately, the network, this small group of organizations helping writers to resettle here, contacted us and say, we have many events coming up. What should we be doing? What is the protocol? Can we share together? And then was also the digital threats. Because as Hamed mentioned, it's one tweet we share, and then you have an avalanche negative of feedback. But we have, even prior the attack to Salman, on the case of Iranian human rights defender Masih Alija was attacked and doxxed on Twitter years ago, where her location, her phone number, everything was shared about her personal life. So we look at that. We have a very big program on digital rights, on online harassment, where we have training for writers and for artists to really try to communicate. Please do bring your voice on social media, but also to do it safely and to understand what you attack, what should you be doing? And it can happen to every one of us, because we are all users of those social media. So that's about it, what we have been doing.
Would anybody else like to address?
Yeah, I just want to highlight also that, like, what happened to Salman Rushdie and the attacks. This is the highest level, but to reach that, there is many low levels. And since Gamal Khashoggi case and the weak response that the American government administration did, we have been seeing like rising in threaten and following writer abroad. For example, a couple of months ago, the DOJ arrested an Egyptian guy who was working closely with New York police, and he was using his connection to spy on other Egyptian writers and activists living in the United States. This is just like a tiny example how this thing is built. Like it's not like, it's an attack suddenly, but you have to gather information. And the funny thing is, when I read the news and I found this guy picture, I remember seeing him on my timeline. Like, he was in every event with my friends in New York and DC and so on. And the problems that I'm not calling that I'm like the American government has to go in war against Saudi Arabia or boycotting Saudi Arabia or this country. I know this is impossible, but I'm talking that inside the American law, there is several mechanisms, starting from Magnitsky law, to like other laws that goes against like human rights violation and blah, blah. And it's all been stopped for the last 4 years by the current American government. Like, there is a case of a friend, Muhammad Sultan, who's an American citizen, being sentenced for 5 years in Egypt and was on hunger strike and blah, blah, and was tortured. Then he moved here to the United States. He's an American citizen. And then the prime minister, the Egyptian prime minister, who was the prime minister during his time in the prison, was here. So he basically went to the American court and accused this guy, this official who's living now in the United States, of torturing him. What happened after that, the American government gave him a diplomatic immunity. So the American court couldn't go against him. So even in the small level, just a symbol level, it's becoming more hard and complicated to find against this regression and attacks.
So, Salil, I wanted to put to you actually Ahmed's question about what people can do with your vast experience working on this subject. What would you say, people who are concerned about that, students who are hearing about these kinds of cases and threats to artistic freedom, what do you see as some of the most promising avenues for making a change?
One is to read their work. I think it's very important to buy their books and read their work. Spread the word among other people. A lot of these writers don't only write about repression and human rights and difficult things. Many times they're just moving novels, but it's the politics that they represent is something that the government of the day doesn't like, and therefore they stop it. If they are in your town, if they come to speak, attend their events. If they are ever in trouble, write letters. Of course, for Ahmad, it was very important that people like Salman wrote to him, but I'm sure Ahmad would have loved postcards that he may have received from pen members, ordinary pen members, because I'll tell you one story about Emo Miomisi, who's a Cameroonian writer, and he was in jail in Cameroon, and he was one of, today happens to be the day of imprisoned writer, incidentally, for PEN International. We celebrated. I'll name the 4 writers when whom we are honoring at the end of our program today. But Eno was in jail, and Alain Mabanko, who is a French national, he wrote to him and he said that every time a writer is jailed, it's not the individual writer who goes to jail, but thousands of readers of his also go to jail, and we will come stomping our feet loudly. And that's exactly what happened in Eno's case, because he started getting so many letters that the jailer said that you must be very important, you must be VIP, very important person. He said, no, I'm a very important prisoner, and that's why this is happening to me. He said, can you please write to them that we are all treating you well? He said, you know, I write the truth. So if it were the truth, I would say that. And believe me, I mean, his treatment started improving after that, and he's now a free man. I met him in Rotterdam 3 or 4 years ago. I believe he now lives in Germany. So people do come out. There is another network called International Cities of Refuge Network, ICON. They do amazing work to get writers in strife in places like Afghanistan, Syria, Bangladesh, who need to get out, Vietnam, and so on, and find a place of refuge for them. And the other thing people can do in America, if you look at the map of ICON, it is about 40 to 50 cities around the world where they have these offers of cities of refuge. Out of them, about 38 probably are in Scandinavia or Northern Europe, right? There's only one city in the US, which is Pittsburgh, or maybe there are 2. There are 2 now?
There are a few more. There are a few more. But
initially, it was only Pittsburgh where Henry restarted the process, and that's when I came to know.
Still low compared to Europe.
It's very low. That's my point. And I think one reason that the town, and one of the interesting, there are a lot of mayors like this idea, you know, to have a writer of refuge, but they are stopped by the immigration laws. They are stopped by the Congress. They're stopped by the people in the Senate who are worried about flood of refugees and so on. And that needs to be challenged. That American citizens can do. And that they can say that, look, yes, there may be a problem on the border. There may be a problem of undocumented aliens, but these are the heroes. And, you know, US or any other society like Britain, which is also trying to build walls, will be better off if these writers are in those countries and safe to be able to write and speak truth to power.
If I may, because I think I love fun fact. I'm all for fun fact. Fun fact. ICON, this International City of Refuge, where it's a wonderful partner, and I commend all the work they are doing in, I think now 66 cities, I think. And yeah, there are a few in the US, but they call City of Xylem. It's another model that has been proven successful in the US because you cannot count on the cities to help, unfortunately, for many reasons that you say, Salil. So Detroit is now a City of Xylem, Rochester, Ithaca, and Pittsburgh. Okay. So, but still, we are far from making and Vegas. The Black Mountain Institute. Absolutely. Sorry, Ahmed. So, just a fun fact: City of Xylem was actually created after a conversation between Salman Rushdie and Jacques Derrida in the 90s at a Congress of PEN International. And it started it in the US, actually. This conversation happened between Salman and Jacques in the US, and the idea blossomed actually in Norway. So just because I like the fun fact.
So we should, I think, be thinking here, what could we do at the University of Michigan, for example, to find ways of welcoming writers at risk, artists at risk, more than we are already doing? Certainly something to think about. I know someone is going to make me very happy and ask a question from the floor now that you've had time to think about it. Yes, please. Okay, sorry, can you just wait for the mic 1 second so the folks on Zoom can hear?
So you mentioned that, I'm not sure what time period you were talking about, but you mentioned that there were 25 writers and 62 visual artists whom you've been helping. I'm not sure if it was last year or a longer period of time. But I'm just wondering if you found that there's a pattern, sort of a medium specificity pattern that, maybe visual artists are targeted more frequently than writers. And if so, if you have any kind of theories about why that might be happening. And then another question, which is kind of a soul-searching question. I think of myself as a sort of free speech absolutist and, a rational person. I've certainly been in situations where, a politician getting silenced on Twitter didn't feel like such a terrible thing to me, and so I'm wondering if you've sort of been in situations where you found your own limit of free speech, where you were sort of maybe relieved that, somebody wasn't saying whatever they were saying.
Thank you very much for those questions. Julie, would you like to start, and then anyone else?
I'll take the first one. Yeah, sorry, I think, so what I was referring about 62 and 25 is like on this kind of anecdotal case list that we have with this project. It's 62% of the cases that, are visual artists and 25 are writers. But I there is a very big gap, and your question is actually very important and very interesting, because why we have so many visual artists, it's actually because there is no network. There is not really a protection mechanism that the writer, even it's not perfect, have PEN International, have the PEN centers around the world, the one who can do this type of work without endangering their programming, because of course not all our colleagues around the world can take a stand on free expression, depends on where they are. But they have this network, and the visual art, they don't. And painters, sculptor, it's very, if you're an artist and you're not facing persecution, you're quite isolated. And the writer has a sense community, because there is PEN and there is a number of, groups that have been around writers. At the moment when I'm not a writer, but you finish a book, that's the moment you want reader to meet your book. When visual artists, it's another principles on the work. The nature of the work is different. It's very isolating. There's no group to represent them. So there's a really big gap of where is the resources for them, because the art world have failed them. Let's be clear. The art world are not taking really a big stand in helping the visual artists. They have a lot of empathy and compassion, but they are not developing own resources for them. And it should be coming from that. It should be coming from their peers. Like the writers did that for the writers. PEN is a group created for writers, funded by writers, and most of the time run by writers. So that's the explanation, fortunately.
Yeah. I'll try my hand at the second one about do we feel that some speech someone, including a politician, and if they are saying things that are vastly offensive, I'm paraphrasing what you're saying, should that be stopped? So I would not draw the line at the offensive. I by and large agree with the free speech is absolute idea. But what would you do when there is one particular instance, which is, the clear and present danger of imminent violence? Radio Rwanda is the example people always talk about, that when you have no other option available, but just one radio which continuously vilifies one community. This was the Tutsis at Radio Mille Collines. And then after that, you have this 3 months plus of violence, and some 800,000, something like that, people were killed in that time. My numbers may be off, so don't pin me on the numbers, but you see where I'm going with. I think that is a problem. And there's a very good segue for us to look into that issue, which is a project called the Dangerous Speech Project, which tries to distinguish between hate speech and dangerous speech. And hate speech is saying that community A is stupid. Dangerous speech is saying community A is stupid and they should be killed. And if the person saying it is not a drunk with a rant outside a British pub, but if that person is actually a person in power, such as Slobodan Milosevic in his famous speech in 1987, or a politician inciting people to go and attack a particular community or a group, and there is no other option, and there's a history of violence in that region, and he's using cultural tropes which are meaningful to that constituency, then alarm bell should ring, and then there is something that needs to be taken care of. The other part of that, which is less, I wouldn't say it is less dangerous, but I think where I'm thinking about it is, you know, when people who are or politicians who use fake news or proliferate anti-vaccine or pro-vaccine propaganda, one way or the other. I don't want to get into that debate and open it. But the fact is that when there are blatant untruths being said by someone in authority, then you need judiciousness, either by the news media that's reporting it, by pointing out the facts right there. Rather, you know, there's an old British journalism thing that if one guy's side says it's raining and the other side says it's sunny, the role of the reporter is not to say one side said this, the other side said that, but open the window and see what's going on actually and report that is it raining or not. And I think that role the media is tending to drop, and I think that they should not. And but other than that, I do not think banning politicians who are important is a good idea, because it gives them a subterranean reputation and attractiveness, and which in fact might actually run counter. Yeah.
We are almost out of time, but Ahmed, would you like to say anything in response to either of those questions?
I will summarize it all.
Okay. Well, let me thank you all very much for coming. Thank the Donia Center for hosting this event. And I'd especially like to thank Rebecca Schnezel and Natasha Gruden-Alobegovic for all their work on this event, which was tremendous. And I hope we will go away, all of us, thinking about what we can do, not only to protect someone famous like Salman Rushdie, but all of the lesser known Rushdies out there, so that we can keep creativity alive in our world at a time when human beings have really never needed it so much. So many thanks to our speakers, and thank you all so much for coming.
Just one moment. I want to name 4 of the lesser known Rushdies from the day of the imprisoned writer. Jose Ruben Marroquin from Guatemala, Narges Mohammadi from Iran, Server Mustafayev from Ukraine, he's a Crimean Tatar, and Sisi Dangaremba from Zimbabwe. They are under stress. PEN International has launched the Day of the Imprisoned Writer today. Go to the website, see the postcards, send the letters. Thank you.
Perfect way to end. Thank you so much.